I can dim the lights and sing you songs full of sad things. We can do the tango just for two. I can serenade and gently play on your heartstrings. Be a Valentino.
What do you see in us that makes you want to join us?
How can I have like these 7 new boyfriends in this giant sausage fest that is Infants on Thrones?
Just hold on tight, that's because I'm a good old.
Because at a certain point you're really angry and you get really defensive. And so the culture that you guys have created in this podcast has just been, really inviting and really fun. And so I was really honored to have you guys ask me to join you. And so I'm happy to do it. And it's really fun.
This is Infants on Thrones. Philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the core.
There's a comment on who wrote the Book of Mormon, and it was part 3 where you weren't on, and you said that Randy was really tedious.
Yeah.
So, what after that made it?
You were like a no vote. No, that was like my first time on your podcast, right? So I had been on Mormon Expression a couple times, and then Infants on Thrones was launched, and then you guys did that, and I wasn't. I when you first made the you said, hey, do you want to come and talk about the Spalding theory because you've written about that. And I hadn't really known that you were doing this kind of like showdown with Craig Criddle. Showdown. And I feel bad about it because I think he's a really nice guy and I like him, and I don't mean to anyway, even though we don't agree on this issue pretty strongly. And then I was probably, when I was saying that you were tedious about this because you were kind of like a big Spalding guy at the time when we were talking.
So you're saying I've changed my mind? Okay.
Well, I don't know if you're as strong in the Spalding theory as you once were. And so anyway, I actually felt I felt like that my performance I was probably being critical of my own performance on that, where I think that I wasn't harsh enough. So I didn't state my case clearly enough to say this is not possible. This is not in question. This is not.
It's possible. Come on, man. Stop with the hyperbole.
No, it's not in question.
It's possible. It's just not likely.
It's a horrific embarrassment. No, that this thing that people do where they're like, oh, well, it's possible that that Nephi and Lehi were living in just a tiny little valley, and we can't, and until we prove it as 100,000% false, then we know it's not true. No, the evidence, the preponderance of evidence, this is not an open theory that any historian has even.
Would you concede it's more possible than there's actually an angel Moroni?
Well, what do you mean by angel?
Oh, God. Hold on. I got to take a piss.
Okay.
Take the microphone with you this time, Randy. He's done that before.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody can really buy the Spalding thing. It just seems so conspiracy theorist, and the whole second manuscript found or whatever the thing is that, it must have been that one that was the source for everything. It just, I don't know.
I mean, the problem with it is that there is so much. Once you read the Book of Mormon, people don't read the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Mormons do, but they don't read it in a different way. They read it just the text, and they're not thinking about the text. So if you read it and you're thinking about it, the text is so clearly coming out of Joseph Smith's mouth, and he is talking about, I mean, there's like a whole chapter that is talking about Martin Harris going to Charles Anthon.
Yeah.
There's just all kinds of stuff that is predicting Joseph Smith. There's just everything that Joseph Smith is doing. And so it doesn't actually, the Spalding theory, therefore, it doesn't actually buy you anything, because it's clearly the text has to then...
Those were the slivers of text that Joseph actually did write, though.
I know, but then you have to account for that, right? So then you're saying there's a text that's the text, and then there's this other text.
Yeah.
It becomes a very complicated theory, and so the reason why that thing survives is that people buy into the Mormon Church's view, which is that Joseph Smith was this 14-year-old dumb kid. Which obviously he was no longer a 14-year-old dumb kid. He wasn't dumb, when he was composing the Book of Mormon. He's a storyteller who had thought about this stuff, who was a preacher, and when you read the Book of Mormon, it's a bunch of sermons that all have the exact same content, just strewn together, and he's running out the clock actually at a certain point in it. So he keeps preaching, and the scribes are writing it down, and he's hoping, when will we get to the end of this book?
Right.
Anyway.
Are you back, Randy?
Yeah.
Did you wash your hands?
No.
Okay.
Why is that any of your business? I don't know.
That's what I ask my kids when they come back from going to the bathroom. I always ask if they wash their hands. So
I didn't even touch my penis.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Pretty good aim.
Good work.
Nice. It's fine.
Okay.
So
we're doing a PPI, so let's go back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Take us back, man.
Oh, you got it. John, take us back to the 60s.
He was born in 71.
I'm born in 1970, so
70.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, my God. You didn't even experience the 60s. Okay.
I didn't.
All right.
So back to 1970. I was born in Aurora, Illinois.
Isn't that where Wayne's World is filmed?
Yeah.
Centered.
Aurora, Illinois.
I think Tom also served his mission in Aurora, Illinois.
There we go.
Yeah.
Allison lives in Aurora, Colorado.
My mom was born in Aurora, Colorado.
Wow.
And up in the sky, there's Aurora Borealis.
Yeah.
I've
seen the movie Frequency. Yeah.
And in Sleeping Beauty,
right?
They call her Aurora,
the goddess of the dawn, which is Eos in Greek. The Greek goddess of the dawn, Eos.
All right.
Wow, you're so erudite.
Erudite.
You're very erudite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, so my great-grandfather had been the branch president of the Aurora branch of the Mormon Church for 23 years and built that out of nothing. And that was where my family's from.
Keep going.
That's it. We moved out of Aurora when I was 3. So there's nothing more about Aurora. I don't know.
Aurora's done. So
done.
You grew up in a Mormon family. I mean, we've talked about this before. You got disillusioned with the church at 8. Was there anything that you liked about the church when you were going through primary, or like at what point did you go, this is just not true?
Anything you like besides Saturday's Warrior?
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked Saturday's Warrior. No, I liked it because I was a leader. So this was a place where, as a kid, I was a star of the whole show.
How tall are you?
6'4".
Okay.
Yeah, and so we know I was pre-quorum president. I was an Eagle Scout a month after I turned 13.
Oh my gosh!
President.
Really?
Yeah.
I was a tenderfoot.
Yeah. I was president of seminary. I was pre-quorum president. In other words, I was at the center of the whole thing. The house counselor, when you wanted to go and take a kid around to have talks in the other wards, he'd bring me. So
you got your patriarchal blessing?
I did after. Though it was more or less after I'd already decided I didn't believe in Mormon Church anymore.
Okay, let's hear the story. That's interesting to me.
So I went away to BYU, and so I'd been a closet doubting teenager. I went to BYU, and a week after being at BYU, I just said, "This society is so corrupt and hypocritical and awful and stupid that I'm not." Actually,
and you didn't even go. You didn't even go on a mission to see how bad it can get.
Right. No, I didn't go on a mission at all. This is just like in the dorms. So I'm at Shipman Hall, the honors dorm at BYU, and that's just my idea. And I've just realized I'm just not involved. I'm not going to be involved in this. And so I went back home the summer after my freshman year, which was actually my sophomore year, because I had taken a lot of AP exams and came into BYU as a sophomore. And in that summer, my mom was interested in helping me get reactivated, or she was worried that I'd left the church because I told her I had. And so she had come up with some idea with the bishop that they were going to give me a calling. And I don't know what it was, but probably to do the ward newsletter or something like that, because I like publishing. And I went and had an interview with the bishop. So this is my PPI, that the last one that I remember having. And, I just laid it out for him. I said, I don't believe any of the church's truth claims. It's all a bunch of crap and all that kind of thing, and so he didn't give me a calling.
Did you use that kind of language? I don't believe the church's truth claims.
I don't know what I said exactly, but I would have said such and such is false, such and such is false. This is a that kind of thing. I don't think I would have said. I certainly wouldn't have said crap. That would have been blast. I couldn't have said that word.
But it might as well have been, for as direct as you were about it.
I was very direct about it, and so he didn't give me a calling. But at that same summer, we did go to the patriarch, who was a real friend of the family. His wife is my mom's visiting teaching companion, and she had been the ward chorister, and when I was a little kid, I was like to sing, and so we had connections, and so he gave me a patriarchal blessing, with kind of trying to encourage me back into the church, kind of thing. So
there wasn't anything about it that impressed you. You were beyond it at that point.
It was I just thought it was like what you'd imagine all patriarchal blessings to be. I don't have any memory of it at all.
Okay, so I guess the reason that I asked, because I was wondering if it played into your being a star, the leadership part.
No, it was already over by the time I had a patriarchal blessing. Uh-huh. So I just remember that the bishop was trying to get me to go on a mission, and since when I'd been a little kid, I'd gone to Germany, and I loved Europe, and I'm very interested in European history. I ultimately went into graduate school to study European history, and the bishop's like, if you put your papers in, I can guarantee that we'll send you to Germany.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, and I thought I had connections with my uncle being an employee high up in the church office building.
I really don't think the bishop had the power to give me this guarantee. I don't.
Yeah, so he was just trying to motivate you to.
Yeah.
So you recently had a 2-hour spotlight on Mormon stories, with John DeLynn, and I listened to that. You mentioned, and you probably talked about this other places as well, but that it was gender inequality, and it was just kind of the political corruption and hypocrisy. That's what you saw, that was your disillusionment out of Mormonism. So that hit your awareness as a teen in the late 80s in Utah?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the thing. So, I had already, when I was 16, I had decided that a lot of the truth claims weren't true. So you could just tell. There was no internet. You couldn't. There was no sources, so I didn't have access to anti-Mormon materials or anybody writing about any of this stuff. But so I just studied a triple combination. And so I would look at the Book of Abraham on Sunday. The talks were so horribly boring when you're in church. And at a certain point, when all through junior high, I would just read science fiction novels in church. But every once in a while, my mom would get mad at me and say, you can't just read novels during church. You have to, listen or something. It was so boring, and so then I just switched and I just started reading the Bible or the scriptures, because she didn't complain about that, And so
you got your triple combination cracked open.
Right. So if I'm reading that, and so I would read that, and so you're reading the Book of Abraham. You go to facsimile number 1, and And it's so clear to anybody, a 16-year-old kid who knows anything about Egyptian history,
any really intelligent 16-year-old could obviously see.
Right. But you see underneath this mummification bed that there's these 4 canopic jars, which are the jars that you put the different organs of the person being mummified in. And that's the same in all Egyptian papyri, right? So there's no...
every 16-year-old knows this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. In the 80s.
Yeah,
sure, of course.
So you don't have to have had like some kind of like access to anti-Mormon information for this, because this is like common knowledge.
I got news for you, John. I think you're in the vast minority here.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that you're an outlier.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it was very clear to me that this was not an ancient document and that this translation was not true.
I feel so stupid right now.
And you can also tell just by reading the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is so clearly not an ancient document. And you can tell it just by reading the Bible. So read the Old Testament and just read, just the confusing things that, as you're reading this text that is so strange, and that just is constantly having, hapax legomena, these ideas, these things that you just don't exist anywhere else, right? So in other words, it'll be a thing.
Hapax legamia? What was that?
Hapax legomenon, which is a thing that doesn't exist anywhere else.
That's right. That's what hapax
legomenon. Yeah, that's what that means. So, in other words, you see those in that text, and then you say, "This is weird. What does that mean?" It doesn't. It's so strange. And the Book of Mormon doesn't have those things in it, because the Book of Mormon is a modern text, which is it's written and it makes its sense to itself.
Yeah, there was a moment. I even remember where I was serving. It was towards the latter quarter of my mission. And I was on the reservation, and I was reading the Book of Mormon insatiably, but I had this really uncomfortable moment where I'm like, God, I'm reading 2nd Nephi, and like all of the prophecies before 1830 are spot on, detailed.
Yeah.
And then everything after that is kind of vague. And I'm like, I just had this thought in my head. If I was an outsider reading this, I could totally see how this is bullshit. But I squashed that. I squashed it because I loved the Book of Mormon so much back then.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I looked up hapax legomenon, and there's dyslegomenon, trislegomenon, and tetrachus legomenon for multiple appearances of legom. Would it be legomeni?
Well, so
what's the plural?
It's Greek, right? And so I'm like every medievalist I know Latin, so Graecias non legator. It's all Greek to me. So hapax legomenon, I guess it's legomena is probably what it is, but it's Greek. I don't know Greek.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway,
all right.
I know when it is Greek. That's what I can say.
You just threw that out so nonchalantly. I'm like, whoa. All right, hang on. Okay,
yeah.
So
well, anyway, that's what I could tell at 16.
Yeah,
and so knowing that, that wasn't the problem. Of course, there's all kinds of things like that, but the problem. And so I thought, okay, well, I could get involved, and I can still be part of this. This is my society, and I could still be involved in this as a social thing. But the problem with it was that as a social phenomenon, it was incredibly unjust, and it was incredibly oppressive. It was oppressive to women. And so my sisters, who were very brilliant people, they were not given the same position that I was given. My mom, who is the smartest person in our ward, wasn't able to be bishop of the ward. So and all those kind of things. And so at that point, I just decided that this just it wasn't something that I was going to be involved with.
Did you ever have spiritual experiences? The whole feeling part of the church, John DeLynn made fun of you as being a Vulcan.
I had the opposite. I had the opposite, because what I would be able to do as a bright young kid who was very articulate, who could talk to adults, who loved to talk to adults.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember this thing where when I was 7 years old, I beat Ray Latterman in chess. So in other words, and it was very embarrassing to him, but it was pretty neat as a 7-year-old, right? So in other words, it was I was in a position where I was interacting with adults, and I liked to interact with adults, and adults liked me, and so I could give talks. Like I say, I would give the talks with the stake high councilman. We go around and give talks, or I give talk as a youth person in church, or any single time the bishop wanted a young person to give a prayer, they'd call on me. And so when I would do that, then like there would be ladies in the ward who would come up afterwards and they would just say, "Oh, I felt the Spirit when you gave that talk. It was so spiritual. I just can't even believe the Spirit I'm feeling when you say that." But when I was giving the talk, I was in my heart, it was so dead, and I was just stone cold. And I would, I could emote, but
you were just towing the company line, and you knew it.
Right, exactly.
And so then
saw
when
the
most spiritual, and when the most spiritual ladies in the ward then came up and told me how much they felt the Spirit, I'm like, what a crock to myself in my heart. All of you people, you all think this, but it is such a crock. So that's where I was.
It just blows my mind that you're able to see the gender inequality in the Mormon Church at such a young age. I totally bought the gilded cage concept for a long time, probably into my early 30s.
What's that gilded cage concept?
The priesthood will try to justify excluding women by putting these women on a pedestal, but then they're in a cage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying now?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, probably. So
you are so
to be honest.
special.
To be honest, though, probably where that's coming from is I'm growing up in this time period when young gay people don't have any gay role models. They don't come out so early like they do now. They are questioning. They don't understand, and so I am myself mentally creating all kinds of refuges for myself so that I'm not coming to terms with, very serious truths that would be hard for me to live with as a 16-year-old, right? And so in doing that, I was definitely, when I'm starting to see, I'm not excited about traditional gender roles. I am not, and so all of those kind of things. So I was able to intellectualize what am I really in favor for is total equality for all people, that I don't see gender in this kind of way, and so that may well have played into it. So it's not just like some kind of innate brilliance, but I always think that rather, especially at the time period that I was growing up in, being born gay is actually just this really wonderful gift that people could have, because you automatically are taught just innately that society and some of these basic social norms that society is teaching are just crap.
It's just a construct.
It's just a horrible construct, and it is.
And it's propped up on everybody accepting it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And so by getting that, by having that just right
insight
in your face, and that insight, you're able to step off from that and just detach yourself from just the imprisoning chains of constraining social norms. In other words, you wouldn't normally step away from that because it's a pretty scary, awful, place to step. But on the other hand, especially
when you're like Glenn and I were, we had every privilege that you can have. We were male, we were white, and we were straight.
Yeah.
And so why would we question why this is the right way to be?
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So did that kind of detachment, did you feel lonely?
I don't know that I felt lonely. I mean, I think that so I hadn't been able to put that all together myself, or I kept it from myself through very serious, like mental constructs that were keeping me from putting it all together, or whatever it is, But when I turned 21 and I met an openly gay person for the first time in Salt Lake City, and I'm like, oh, he's normal. This is how this works. That's great. Like a week later, I'm like, I'm gay. That makes all the sense in the world. There we go.
Yeah, but wasn't your first love a kid who went on a mission, and you didn't?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was before I knew I was gay, right?
Okay.
So in other words, that was a crush.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess what I was trying to get at, as you were in your teens and you're deconstructing the church as you're a part of it, and you have this innate distance from it, you're able to look at it from the outside. Did you feel, and I'm kind of leading to the value that you place in community now, right? That's kind of where this is coming from. That you didn't feel a part of that community, you felt kind of outside of it. That's what I was wondering, if you felt lonely, that you didn't really have a place in the Mormon church. Because you were seeing it so differently than everybody else around you,
right? But that didn't mean I didn't have a place. I had a place. I was the leader.
Okay, so
right?
you felt.
So I'm like in the Book of Abraham.
Accepted.
I'm one of the great ones that was standing around there with Abraham.
But you didn't believe that.
What? That doesn't mean I didn't.
You didn't
picture
believe that
myself
the Book of
that way.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you didn't use it to your advantage.
That doesn't mean where my place was.
Does not compute.
No, I agree with you. Yeah. But no, I wasn't. I didn't feel alienated from the church. I went like, oh, all of you people are, like you all get along and I don't, or something like that. No, I wasn't alienated. I wasn't apart from people or antisocial or any, those kind of things.
But there wasn't like a part of you that when these women would come up to you after you gave a youth talk for the traveling high councilman, that just would gush at you. There wasn't a part of you, your pride, that like really liked that.
I liked that I loved that I had the capacity to manipulate them all. Yes.
Right.
So I mean, so for example, I mentioned that before. So you mentioned like whatever, I had a crush. So so once I had decided that was all a crock, then I manipulated it to my, it was now I'm in an environment that I'm in charge of because I can understand it, and so I wanted my friend to spend time with him, right? And so I took 2 weeks. I got called to be priest. I had been the doubter, and so I hadn't been teachers quorum president. I had pulled away, and I wasn't interested in it. But suddenly now I'm like, oh, now I can use the church. The church can actually do stuff for me. So then I smiled at the new priest quorum advisor. I talked to him, blah blah blah. It took 2 weeks for me to be called to be priest president or whatever. It's not called president, whatever you call it.
First assistant to the bishop.
Yeah. So I got 2 weeks later, I'm first assistant to the bishop. I call my friend to be second assistant. So I smiled at those ladies, who felt the spirit. 2 weeks later, I'm seminary president. I call my friend to be counselor in seminary presidency. So obviously, that's how I assumed that the world would work going forward. I would be bishop. I would call my friend to be first counselor.
My God, you could have done so much. You could have manipulated so much if you'd just gone on your mission.
Of course.
Yeah, you would have been AP for sure.
Oh, exciting.
How awesome would that have been?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it eluded me, and I felt like a failure for it.
You probably weren't approaching it from as crass a position.
Yeah. All right, interesting. So then we talked about you being at BYU and being interested in, was it European history, medieval history?
Yeah.
And then you left. Where was that? That was Michigan? Michigan State?
Went to Michigan.
Michigan.
The University of Michigan.
Okay. And what was that experience like for you, leaving? Because now you're out of Mormonism completely, right?
Yeah, and you're in Ann Arbor, which is a bastion of intellectual. It's a playground for intellectualism.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful place. And so what had happened was I had one semester at BYU. I'd had a semester abroad in Europe where I was just completely on my own. I was supposed to be TA to Bill Hamblin from Farms, and we were going to be at the Jerusalem Center, and I was going to be the TA for his course. But what ended up happening was that the Persian Gulf War broke out. And so everybody, all the students and everything like that were and Bill were in Istanbul, and they went around Greece and things like that. I was supposed to join them at some point in Jerusalem, but I was waiting for the all clear to go after, the Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. And so I was in France and Germany and just hanging out in Europe. And that never came because then the war happened, right? And so they canceled the whole semester and everything like that. And so in the meantime, though, in France at that semester abroad, I just went without telling any single person. I was on a regular semester abroad where I have a Eurorail pass, and I'm going around to all of the youth hostels and all that kind of thing. And I just completely excised all of Mormonism from my entire past, including that I was a BYU or anything. And so in doing that, I just met all of these people, and I hung out with them, and I had beers, and I, was just doing, whatever. And I just had so much fun, and I just enjoyed my life so much that, I was just like, this is wonderful. All of this misery that I've had in Provo can end, And so then when I moved to Ann Arbor, I did the same thing. Just cut it all out of my past. It was all gone,
So I want an aside. This isn't about you, but the time period you're talking about, this is early 1991. I remember because this is when I'm getting ready to go on my mission, and when Saddam invaded Kuwait, I think this was probably January of 91 because it was right before I went. I was so excited. I was so happy.
Times.
Yes, I thought because I remember getting this lesson once in seminary. About the book of Revelations and how there was peace in the heavens for the space of a half an hour, and then all hell breaks loose. And the seminary teacher speculated, now, if you do this and this and this, a half an hour turns out to about 7 years, roughly. And so
Bible math is awesome.
Right. He created this entire eschatology for me that was like, okay, boom, this fits. This is great. Things are starting in the Middle East. I'm going to be a missionary in the middle of this. I'm one of Saturday's warriors here in the latter days, and this is just all validating me. I love it. So anyway, that's the end of my side.
No, I wasn't looking at it that way.
No. I don't remember the name anymore, but yeah.
This is an aside, but it just amazes me at how much your life paralleled my brother's life, because so when he graduated from high school, he didn't go to BYU. He went to UC San Diego, and for that entire 2 semesters, he pretended like he had never been Mormon, just to see what it was like.
Yeah.
Eventually, he did go on his mission, and then went to BYU, transferred to BYU. But it's so eerie. Every time you tell a story, it's like so much like my older brother. So that's an aside.
I really like your older brother based on the podcast that I listen to. So,
right. Yeah.
So you're now in Ann Arbor. You're in graduate school. And what's next in the life of John Hamer?
Well, so from there, I ultimately decided I wasn't going to go into being a professor, and as much as I like teaching, which I do, and research, I also really like publishing, and I just love making books, and I love books and magazines and that kind of thing. And so I went into publishing, started working for the University of Michigan Press and a bunch of other academic presses, and ultimately went on to trade publications. So that's like my profession now, which has been very good for me in terms of being able to do creative work, but that allows me to have a lot of freedom to do a lot of other things that I like to do. So, and so that's where that all went. In the meantime, I ultimately met Mike Karpowitz, who, when I brought him back met my parents in Minneapolis, that he met my mom, who's Mormon. and she's active Mormon to this day. And so he was very interested in finding out about this Mormon past of mine, and so I suddenly had to kind of say, oh, well, how do I describe this story, which I didn't know because I didn't have any way to describe it because I had gotten rid of it. And in doing that, then he was very curious about it, and I would so I didn't know anything. I mean, actually, at a certain point, I had exhausted my 13-year-old history. When I was a 13-year-old, the history that I knew of the Mormon Church, which was insanely boring. The kind of church history that was taught out of the manuals and that kind of thing. And so he was asking, well, what about this and what about that? And I'm like, I have no idea. I had completely abandoned, frankly, American history because I assumed that American history was really boring based on how boring Mormon history was, and that's why I'd gone into medieval and ancient history, to real history, way back in the real past. And so then I read.
How would you describe your metaphysics at that point?
Whoa!
So at that point, where it had been was I had gone off and kind of created my own narrative religion. And that's hard to even describe what it is, but a religion of how I tell stories about myself and how I tell stories about the universe and how I'm framing everything that would be in some ways self-empowering, but it was mythic in its own way, but it was self-created.
But you were aware it was self-created.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So I had when I was 27, I wrote an autobiography or edited an autobiography of myself, which is called Amakitia, which is
Amakitia?
Amakitia, which is the Roman concept of friendship. And so Cicero has a important work called De Amakitia concerning friendship. And so it's an idea of how people relate to each other. And so that was the kind of the framework of how my self-created cosmos worked together. It was classically informed in that way. So.
Okay, so you wouldn't have been comfortable with the label at that time of agnostic. You were somehow drawn to preserve some kind of religious belief.
There was a kind of a religion. That doesn't mean I wasn't agnostic. So it would mean that my theism wouldn't have involved a higher power.
At that stage in your life?
Yeah.
Mm.
And give us some context. How old are you at this point? You're 22, 23?
27.
27. Okay. So you brought Mike home to meet your family, and you've been with Mike now how long?
18 years.
18 years?
Yeah.
Wow. That's as long as I've been married.
Yeah. So it's going well. We'll be together forever.
Yeah.
Are you guys sealed? I'm just kidding.
Oh, come on.
Just kidding.
In your own mythical religion, have you done that?
We didn't do any ceremony.
In your own mythical religion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you haven't? No? Yeah.
But definitely it was informed. I mean, there's no doubt, so I'm raised Mormon, right? And so a lot of my values would have still been like Mormon concepts of eternity. So when I first started dating as a gay man, I was like kind of bizarrely fixated on eternal marriage, and so I would put like way too much pressure on like a first date, because I'm really like doing like, well, he's not really an eternal companion, or he really is an eternal companion. I got fixated on him, right? So I mean, and a lot of times like when a gay guy is hooking up with you, it's not for eternal companions. So anyway, I wasn't particularly in a place for a whole lot of the time period in between when I left BYU and got together with Mike, that where I was mature enough and able to understand the other person and actually being able to understand him as opposed to just falling in love with love and falling in love with my concept of eternal companionship or whatever I had decided that I was looking for, So that was a problem.
And how did you meet Mike?
in a gay bar.
Oh, the gay lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, the old gay lifestyle. Now nobody. Gay bars are a thing of the past. It's all Grindr now. So.
Grindr? Oh, is that like an online?
It's an app.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to back up to your teenage years when the hormones are surging. Did you have any experiences with females?
No.
And no interest whatsoever?
So I had when I was 15 at summer camp, I had a girlfriend, and we kissed once. Like in a very innocent way.
Yeah, like kissing your sister.
Yeah. And so that was the year that Karate Kid 2 was out. So we had so our song was "I am the man who will fight for your honor."
Peter Cetera.
Yeah. I am the man who will fight for your honor. I'll be the hero you've been dreaming of. We're gonna live forever, knowing together that we did it all for the glory of love. There you go. Yeah.
So that's it.
That's my whole experience.
That's the extent of your
start and done
of your experience with tits and boobs, or tits and ass. Yeah.
Yep.
It does nothing for you.
No.
So please edit.
Why? Well, I don't know. I mean, John can choose what he wants to edit. So like when I was,
the only reason I say is like I'm such a slave to it. It's
sure.
You could talk about that. I mean, that's an interesting thing for
it is an interesting
straight guys, right? In other words, straight guys don't have this experience, right? That's fine. You can be curious about that.
And I'm going to escalate it. Okay. So when I was a teen and I would masturbate, I was totally picturing girls at school. I was imagining stories that like my friends had told me about, like lazy boy chairs, or while they're driving down the street. I mean, I still very vividly remember the stories that they told me that I used to picture.
Yeah.
So what for you, because you hadn't acknowledged to yourself homosexuality. Was that a part of your experience, or what was that for you?
No. Was not a part of it.
In short, no.
So no masturbation, no fantasizing about anything, or what?
There was no masturbation. No, there was no women that were involved.
Well, no. Okay, so my question is, were there guys? Like, did you? So you did, even though you didn't acknowledge to yourself that you were attracted to men. You were
men. Yeah, exactly.
Ah, okay.
So in other words, there was no like willingness to dot obvious dots together to make a line, right? Because of what you wouldn't want to put those lines all together. You don't want to tie that all up. You might be able to tell that those are canopic jars and it's not actually Abraham getting sacrificed, but you don't want to put together the dots that say, "Whoa, you are gay." So that was the one that didn't get tied together until later. So when I'm the things that I'm thinking of was, I mean, there were guys, when in the locker room when I was in junior high and things like that. Oh, I just couldn't help but be attracted to, right? So.
Okay. So, what's your earliest memory of having, like, because you talked about the missionary who you had a crush on, but you probably had because what I'm trying to do is think about it from a heterosexual point of view.
Yeah.
I've had crushes in second grade.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I was in third grade, I mean, this is the difference for gay boys as opposed to boys who are with girls, is that you don't have the hanging out with the girls all the thing in that same way, right? And so I had like my best friend when I was in third grade, and we would have sleepovers. And so I remember, vividly from very early that kind of time when you're, like having a overnight and you're building forts and, for whatever reason you decided to get naked.
Even straight kids do that.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and my Korean friend was uncircumcised, so that was always really interesting to see him pee.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to see that until BYU.
Oh, okay.
I was from a very Gentile suburb, Minnesota. So,
Oh yeah, you betcha.
yeah.
All right.
For whatever reason, the dorms had the boys' dorm or the men's dorm has like this open public shower or whatever, where the 4 people are standing facing each other.
That's standing around the tree of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember on the and I'm a bit younger than you, but in the second floor of the library, there was this awesome bathroom. It had so many stalls. Nobody ever went down to the second floor. It was mostly the science books.
Yeah.
And I would just relish in how empty the bathroom was.
Yeah.
And I then later found out that was like the gay hookup place. And I don't know if that's myth or if that's true.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with
the second floor library
with gay hookups and bathrooms. So that's just that's not
part
of my. That's just not part of my experience. I mean, if I had been a little older than people, like a lot of people, that was their only way they were doing stuff. I'm sure, like at rest stops and bathrooms or whatever they were doing. But that I was in a time period that was later than that. So,
all right. So let's move on to. You're adopting kind of your own form of metaphysics, and you get into Mormon studies, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Well, so like I say, I ended up finding out that Mormon history was actually quite interesting, as opposed to what I had been taught. And so actually, the very first book I read, my mom had a copy of No Man Knows My History, and I read it, and it was amazing. Fawn Brody's a great writer. And it's just a riveting book. And actually, in a lot of ways, Fawn Brody rehabilitated Joseph Smith for me, because I think that she's actually quite sympathetic to him. And so I had been really much more negative towards him than where she was at, And so I'm like, I can kind of understand him now, So anyway, so I went from there to having studied, I voraciously read everything. So... and it didn't take too long to have read all of secondary history on Mormon history. So,
but when you went to Michigan, what was your degree in?
Was in medieval European history.
And
so
did you finish it?
I didn't finish. I was going to get a PhD, and so I left before I finished.
Okay. And then you got into Mormon studies.
Yep.
I want to know, like with publishing, how many books have you written yourself and published?
From writing, I have done amazingly few.
Yeah.
to very few. But what I've actually done in terms of what have I done in terms of pieces of books, like cover design of published books, I've probably done 40 books. In terms of the typesetting, the layout, the interior design, it's probably another 50 books. In terms of like doing the maps for books, there's maybe 25 or 30 books or so. And I've contributed articles to books, I've edited books, I've written short books, but I don't have like a magnum opus where I've written like like a great book that everyone's like, it's like Todd Compton who wrote
right.
In Sacred Loneliness. I don't have that one really core book.
Do you want that? Is that in the future for John Hamer?
I need to sit down and write.
Is that your Book of Mormon experiment from last year?
No, that's not the main one. I'll write. That's a short book. I'll write that one.
Yeah.
But I have a couple other books I got to write. That'll be the big book.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
So your foray into Mormon studies, is that the impetus that drew you back towards Mormonism in a weird way?
Yeah.
Kind of a backdoor way?
Yeah, entirely. So it didn't take very long at all from getting involved in Mormon History Association and then the John Whitmer Historical Association. Within just a couple of years of being in the John Whitmer Historical Association, Mike and I became directors of it. And so, Mike really central to it.
But you were able to get Mike interested enough in Mormon history to...
He was very interested in it right from the start. So he was, like I said, him asking all the questions about it is what actually got me to start focusing on it.
Okay.
So we would go on Mormon history tourism together.
Cool.
Yep. And then I met the whole community, and it was so amazing.
What year? What year is this?
So Mike and I went to Kirtland Temple, which is the very first time I met anybody in Community of Christ, in the year 2000 for my birthday. So my birthday is April 2nd, so it's very close to that. April 6th is very close to that. So we went there during Community of Christ World Conference, and that's when I met Community of Christ people for the very first time.
And they were Community of Christ by 2000, right?
That's when they were changing the name, right then.
Right then.
Yep.
Okay. Because they hemorrhaged a lot of their membership at that point, did they not?
No, not over the name change. They'd already lost people 15 years earlier over women.
Over the women getting the priesthood?
Yeah. And actually, that's just the final straw for those conservatives that left at that point. They were already upset about everything else that went before that. So
it's so interesting to kind of parallel what happened in the 60s with the RLDS Church and the LDS Church. The LDS Church went totally counterculture.
Yeah.
They became uber-American, anti-communist. The John Bircher Society took over. All the liberals had died, like B.H. Roberts and John Whitsoe. And the conservatives lived on, like Bruce R. McConkie, Joseph Fielding Smith, and Harold B. Lee, and to a slightly lesser extent, President Kimball. And then, meanwhile, back in Independence,
everything was
the
different.
intellectuals were the ones that were in charge.
Yeah.
And the academics, and they took their church in a totally different direction.
Right.
And both were faced with the same information.
Yep.
And both reacted totally differently. So if you want to talk more about that and articulate that a little more.
Yeah, no, well, it's kind of amazing, but I mean, really, it's not just a 16-year-old kid who can look at the truth claims and see that it just can't be held up, right? And so all of the pseudo-academic apologetics that the Mormon Church has kind of engaged in, these farms guys, to toe the line it's just absurd. It's just really horrible, and you can't. It's phony and crap and everything else, and so you can't toe that line of these old stories and these old claims and everything like that. But the Mormon Church has doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down,
and has really benefited financially compared to the RLDS Church.
Sure,
it's a good business model.
They have a lot of CEOs that are in charge.
Right.
So it has nothing to do with, sure, of course, you can always there's all kinds of ways to make money in the world.
All the money is in bullshit. I'll just say that right now.
Well, I'm just saying you can make money all kinds of different ways. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about where you're dealing with, you have a thing that you had as a treasured belief, let's say, that's central to your being. That may well have more meaning to you than all the tea in China, right? But if you instead trade it for all the money in the universe and owning a mall or whatever you're going to do, that's fine. You can own like plenty of malls. That's, maybe malls will come back. Make a comeback,
Not likely.
Yeah. So that's not, so if that's your goal, good. There's all kinds of ways to make money, and, so.
It's just really, the reason why it's interesting to me is because I really believe that all the money's in bullshit. Like, people that sell bullshit, people will just throw money at them. The people that try to expose the bullshit make nothing, and they're vilified.
Yeah.
And so what happened with the RLDS Church in the 60s is they came to grips with the historical facts, and they reacted very appropriately. Whereas the Mormon Church reacted the opposite. They doubled down, they obfuscated, they excommunicated. It was a great business model in America. When you compare the two, the bullshit that the LDS Church was propagating in reaction to the new light being shown on the historical facts, it made all the money. And that's...
Well, to be fair, the RLDS Church was poor before. So anyway,
so they suck.
It's always been poor, but anyway, yes, I agree with you. The LDS Church has been able to go from they were concerned that they were going to go bankrupt in the 60s with under Wilkinson and all the building that they did and everything like that, and they've been able to become intensely wealthy. There's no doubt about that the money's all there. But real growth is already gone. The growth model that was happening in North America was really true and happening in the 1960s and 70s. It was happening because of the uncertainty of the counterculture, this time period that everyone was living where society seemed to be unraveling, and people did like the idea of a really solid port in the storm. And they really, in the Saturday's Warrior mode, moved over to Mormons, and that's when North Americans actually were joining the Mormon Church. That's not happening anymore. No. So there's the numbers are generated artificially around the developing world and all that kind of thing. It doesn't really matter. So the demographic situation for the Mormon Church is a couple generations still away from having any problem, and they're still going to be making on the increase of money, because as people age, so when people are in their 50s, 60s, and that kind of thing, the money will continue to increase for another 30, 40 years or something like that. So they're in no danger at all, money-wise or in terms of their political clout. But in terms of actual, real demographic growth going forward in the future, it's already over, because you can't turn the ship around anymore. So the path that it's actually on is to extinction. It's not, I mean, it'll be fine, but it isn't a growing concern. It's a shrinking concern, and it'll be doing that for the rest of its history. So
that makes me want to ask you a question. Do you think the Mormon Church will ever allow gay marriage in the temple? Ever?
I don't think so, no.
It's too central to their doctrine?
Nah, I think it does. I think they could change it easily. It's not a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it matters. But they just already have doubled down on this so hard, and nobody's going to pressure them to change. Ever. Because it doesn't matter how normal it gets in the future, because in the future, Mormonism is going to be so unnormal that nobody cares what they do. So it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's like, what do Amish people do? Do we care if they use toasters or not? We don't care. It doesn't matter. So we're not going to care.
They sell their furniture. I know that.
Yeah.
Got an Amish. Are you still there, Glenn?
Yeah, I stepped out for a second just to get something to drink, but I'm back. If we're ready to go in a slightly different direction, or do you? Is there something you want to keep going down right
now?
No,
I took us right to the dead end of the road. So okay. New direction is very welcomed. Right now.
I don't know how well this is going to work or not. But as I was listening to your recent Mormon Stories episode, John, and I was thinking about the things you were saying, I just started writing down words that I wanted to hear you talk about. So okay. I don't even really know in my head what I'm envisioning, because there's 17 words. I've counted them. And if you spend a couple minutes on each one, we're going to be on for a long time. But
it reminds me of 17 Points of a True Church. Did you ever get that meme?
No.
Oh, my God. Okay. We're going to have to do a podcast on that.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. All right. So the first one, I just want to hear what your random what's it called when you do this in a therapy? It's like word association, something like that.
Association, yeah.
Judgment.
What do I think about judgment?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
It's kind of broad.
The first association I guess I have is that I'm opposed to churches having any judgment. They're the churches judging others in that way. I think that judgment is something to be eschewed, that isn't. I don't like the Joseph Smith translation that changes Matthew that says, "Judge not that you each not judge," to "judge a righteous judgment."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're right when you judge people,
yeah, then suddenly that's good. So I don't like that, and I don't like judging people. On the other hand, I do think that it's critically important that we do think about things, that we are constantly making judgments. It's inevitable that we make judgments. And so we, on the one hand, are doing that, and it's important for us in every aspect of our life that we see something, we make a judgment, but we also have to be aware of all the unconscious factors in our judgments, and we also have to be very wary of our judgments and be prepared always to say, well, why am I thinking that way? Why did I immediately jump to that conclusion? Why am I, why am I there?
Yeah, so, being aware of our cognitive biases.
Yep.
Cool. I like it. Okay, this could work.
Okay.
One down, 16 to go.
Right. I think
Okay.
would be
Here's one
great
for you. Here's one for you, Glenn. Hapax legomena. No.
Yeah, well, Google. Yeah.
Spell it.
Ideally, we'd have Bob here to like rate each one of your answers on a scale of 1 to 5. But
We can edit him in.
Right.
Let him tell it afterwards. Okay.
So the second word is condemnation.
You said condom.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I think of that as being similar to judgment in some ways, although it's obviously a much more negative bias or negative word associated with a judgment. You're condemning something that you've judged to be bad.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to condemn things that I think are bad, that I think are practices that are leading in bad ways. Where I am grounded on that is that I'm not. I think Bob has asked, well, does that imply a absolutist framework or something like that? But rather, I tend to focus my various ideas about condemnation or things to be condemned based on utility and goals. So, do we want to have a free society in North America where people are able to, where there's a lot of equity, where people are constantly innovating, where people are able to be liberated and thinking thoughts together, and the maximal number of people are living life in a positive way? Do we want to maximize that? And so therefore I'll condemn a policy or an idea or a thing, an ideology that will tend to have the results that will limit that or that will go against that goal. So in other words, it's focused always on what are the end results.
Yeah, and I stacked those two words next to each other, for a reason, and it's a little redundant. But to me, judgment by itself is kind of a neutral term, just by itself. But I think that we give it a lot of meaning, where a lot of times we say you're judging me. What we really mean is you're condemning me. And, so when I was listening to your answer on judgment, it seemed like if it's this kind of judgment, it's bad, but if it's this kind of judgment, it's good. And where, condemning something is that first kind of judgment.
Bad.
Yeah,
Except for, in my opinion, you can condemn things that really are bad.
Bigotry.
Right, sure. Yeah, but it's a form of judgment, but... because you can have judgment where you accept things as well.
Right.
Because you've made that judgment and you've accepted it. And then you make a judgment and you condemn something. So,
right.
All right. Third word, spirituality.
So spirituality, I think, is a very strange word, and that people have very odd ideas about it. And so, like a lot of people, especially, it's very popular in the 21st century for people to say that I'm spiritual but not religious.
Right.
You know what I say to girls? I say, I'm not honest, but you're good looking. Sorry.
Does that work?
I don't get it.
That's a functional pickup line?
That's actually, I ripped that off from Daniel Tosh, but...
Okay.
But I mean, are you drawing an equivalency here to the connection between religion and spirituality?
Who?
Yeah. Well, to say you're not religious but you're spiritual, there's kind of an equivocation there of the words, and I know what they're getting at. It's just the way that they say it that's annoying.
Yeah. The problem is the word religion doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So the word religion is absolutely worthless, and we should just throw it away. The construct doesn't have any meaning. So for me, what does spiritual mean for me, myself personally? It means spiritual is the opposite of physical. And so an idea is therefore spiritual because it isn't physical. So the realm of ideas is spiritual. But we don't use that word to mean that way because we are living in this 19th century world where they created this idea of spiritualism, where there's like physical ghosts or this other imagined nonsense and things like that. But that's physical. So those are not even actually spiritual in the proper traditional sense of the word, what it means. So I would prefer possibly the realm of ideas is what we might call the spiritual.
So
yeah, and the spirituality that's created in this postmodern world is really a cheap imitation of what. And that's the thing that drives me crazy is this whole young Earth creationism thing is a modern innovation. In the face of modern science, young Earth creationism was created.
Right.
It didn't exist back with the great theologians of Christianity, and
no, it's a brand new modern thing.
Yeah, and that's
a reaction to science.
Right, and it's so exactly. It's a reaction to science, challenging things,
but
it's just so disappointing.
So, since it's an idea, does that make it spiritual?
So yes, the idea of young Earth creationism, their ideas about it, that's spiritual. It's not a physical thing.
Yeah. So intellectual pursuits, philosophy.
Intellectual. That's another synonym. Then.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and this was one that came right out of that Mormon Stories interview. As I was listening to you talk about,
emotional would be another synonym.
Emotion.
So in other words, it's
okay. It's spiritual.
So emotions are also part of that component. So I don't want to, John in that interview was. Saying, "Oh, you're a real intellectual. You don't have emotions and that kind of thing." Right. I actually feel like I am quite an emotional person and am in touch with my emotions. I don't eschew them. I don't think that emotions are bad or inferior, or that by having emotions you are a lesser person or anything like that. I think that actually we should explore our emotions and be introspective about them in the same way that we're introspective about our thoughts, our ideas, our deep-seated convictions, or any other thing. So
all right. Okay, I'm going to go on to the fourth word. I think there's more here that we could talk about with spirituality, but it might come up later on. So the fourth word is eternal. What does that mean to you when you hear it?
So eternal is this, so that would be a synonym for infinite. It is this a vaster perspective, so it is a antonym for temporal. So it's the opposite of what is existing in time and change.
So you put it as
eternal would be, for example, Plato's ideas. He talks about the eternal ideas. So for Plato, their ideas themselves are eternal. You have this idea of what is justice or something like that, and that somehow exists outside of temporality.
Yeah. So, and to me, the reason I grouped this right after spirituality is because I wanted to explore this, because I expected that you'd say that spirituality was ideas. So, if you take something like Plato saying that justice is an eternal idea, is it? Because to me, it would seem like it's a product of culture and it's finite, not infinite.
Right. Well, no, but he would then argue that everything that you have, where you have an idea of justice that is culturally based,
right,
you aren't getting eternal justice, right? And so, whether or not he's right, a lot of people don't think so, Right. So in other words, is there anything that's eternal? Maybe not. So it's a concept, it's a conception, it's an ideal. Whether or not we can say that anything in our actual dynamic, ever-changing life is actually eternal is another question entirely. Because everything is ever-changing, everything is evolving, all ideas are evolving.
So do spirituality and eternal, do those coexist? Is there a connection there, or is it two completely different ideas altogether?
Well, so if spiritual is the entire realm of ideas, the idea of eternal ideas, or the idea that there is some kind of eternal perspective or something like that, is just within that realm.
Okay. I don't understand that, but okay.
Really?
No, I don't.
Well, in other words, there might be the other idea that I was just giving you about that everything is constantly evolving is also within that realm of ideas. So in other words, Plato proposes a idea, and we can argue with him. We can become Platonists or Neoplatonists, and we can say, wow, Plato really has a great idea, which he's influenced all of our civilization ever since then. Or we can say, he's totally wrong, which a lot of people have done, that's not how it works, So.
Yeah, the only thing that's certain in life is that things will change.
Yeah, well, so then you're really, who is it? Who said that? Is it Thales? Or, there's the very earliest Greek philosophers who was like, everything is in change. Life is flux. Everything is constantly in change. So that's another completely different way of looking at it, which is also, I'm also very, that has a lot of appeal to my thinking. So I like Plato too, but I like everything's flux. So anyways, both of them.
but what in what we've discovered scientifically, what gives any indication that anything is constant and eternal? The universe came to existence 13.7 billion years ago.
Right.
And it's now expanding at an ever increasing rate. I mean,
right.
There's
So is there anything in that is constant? So the small force, the greater force,
you have
gravitation, electromagnetism.
Yeah.
The constant of why is the speed of light a constant where it is at?
But what's the result of all those constants is inconsistency.
But it's possibly eternal. Right? So,
eternally inconsistent.
I know, but I don't know. That's a thing. I'm not saying, oh yeah, it has to be this way based on all of that. We're finding out new things all the time about.
Well, but if it's expand, contract, and it loops infinitely or eternally, then that's where you've got the constant and the eternal combined, right?
That would be one way.
Okay.
But one way would be is there another way though? In other words, it's hard to say because it at the moment of that Big Bang or whatever are all of the major forces that are potentially underlying the fabric of existence, or did they all not exist exactly that way? So maybe that's the case, right? So maybe the speed of light and gravitation and the small force and the greater force, all those things didn't exist exactly that way prior to the Big Bang. I don't know.
I think right about now, Tom's nose is bleeding.
That's a constant.
Yes.
Okay, number 5, cynicism.
Well, so poor classical cynics have a bad name today, So the actual philosophers from ancient Roman times, I think the actual cynics were doing something really quite good. Their goal was to say, hey, we have been living throughout all of time until now that we've suddenly created civilization to the point where it's at, and we have been slaves to all of the preceding social norms and conventions. But all of these things, why do we accept all of these things as being the case? Why is family so important? Why is law important? Why are any of these things, why we're slaves to this in life? And so the cynics told everyone that we should just, get rid of them all, throw it all away, and be able to transcend all of that and live some kind of natural law life or something like that. Whether or not what they offered in alternative had any value, the skeptical portion of that cynicism may well have been incredibly valuable. I don't think so. In terms of contemporary cynicism, what it means now, you may well just resign yourself to where you're at, and that's certainly a decision you can make, and it's completely philosophically justifiable. But in some ways, you can also make the exact same instance that's not based on anything. You're just saying, it does nothing. You could also just say, I'll just say this is important to me. And so you could just as easily do that, and you may well find more happiness. So that's a utilitarian explanation to cynicism.
Yeah, well, I find that cynicism and skepticism are often conflated.
Yeah,
that's my next word, by the way.
Okay, conflation?
No, skepticism.
Skepticism.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not the same. It's not the same. So.
Okay.
Go ahead with skepticism. Yeah, so I wanted to compare the two. So draw that out, Randy.
Well, really what skepticism is taking a default position of I don't believe until you convince me otherwise. Right. Cynicism is just dismissing things out of hand.
Right.
So you're not even willing to look at the evidence. So there's a huge difference between the two. But often cynics and skeptics will find themselves in the same camp on any given issue, and then they get just kind of conflated together by the enemy of whatever
Right. Somebody who has some kind of somebody has some kind of like extreme belief that they've just decided they believe, right. and then suddenly the person who's just a very honest skeptic, well, there's no evidence here, is getting called a cynic. You just don't believe anything,
right?
You don't have an open. Your mind is not open,
right?
Yeah,
right. Whereas an actual skeptic is skeptical of everything, including cynicism. So anyway.
Right. Exactly. And really, being a skeptic to me is a virtue.
Sure.
Being a cynic is not, and the conflation is really one of my most big. It's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah, I would say again that's like the modern terms for that, because the original cynics, the people who were cynics, I think that they also had a valuable thing that they were doing. But
because back then they didn't have any evidence to back up their theories, but they were just like, this is bullshit. I just feel it. It's bullshit. Right. And so their voice was really important because they challenged the status quo.
Right. And that's something that's just very important in society, because we just have so much mass of just wanting to be Xerox copies of everything that went before us. Just there's so much impetus, and yet
days.
Why? Why? I mean, why are you doing that? Why are you doing anything? So
question everything.
Okay, I'm truncating my list as we speak, so I'm shortening this up, so we won't have 17.
Okay.
But
okay.
Next word, switching gears, is respect.
Is that LEG?
No, it could be
respect.
Respect. That's respect with a K.
Respect is important. So if this show teach you anything, it should teach you how to respect everyone. Animals, children, bitches, spasmos, mingers, lesers, fatty boombas, and even gaylords.
Yeah, right.
So respect, I mean, I guess if you...
this is a difficult PPI, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey, really hard questions.
This is a guy that at 16 years old figured out that the Book of Abraham wasn't true just from looking at it. So I think he can handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
When you have empathy for people, when you try to put yourself in their shoes, see where they're coming from, that's helpful in being able to have an underlying treatment of everybody that you encounter with respect, with a position where you are able to not just be absolutely dismissive of people when you immediately encounter them, and when you get to this point where you lose that, and you just assume that everybody is in this kind of category that you don't respect, that you dehumanize. So, for example, when I get into this anti-Spalding theory mode, and I start attacking everybody who's on the Spalding theory side. Well, that was an example, right? And so, and then I called, I called Randy, whatever the word is that
tedious.
He remembers.
It was tedious.
Tedious, yeah.
Tedious.
Or when, so it's not just that happens. There's a couple of these other things, but besides the Spalding theory that really get my goat for whatever reason, and then I go down that path. Oh yeah, so with Rock Waterman, right? So he was doing the thing about Joseph Smith. It really wasn't a polygamist. It was really not him who started polygamy.
It was all Brigham Young, right?
It was all Brigham Young, and it's just so not true. That's so wrong.
It doesn't even make
in
any
every
sense.
way. It's crazy in 1,000 ways. And so then he first was. I had no idea. I didn't know him from Adam, and he came on to the New Order Mormon board, and he was saying that, and I just came out like this battleship and attacked him for no reason. In other words, just because I'm used to people who are arguing that, and I had this, it's not
caricature.
Yeah, it's a caricature. So where he's dehumanized, he's in this category, and I just am not coming at him from a position of where is he coming from, And so you shouldn't do it. You should always take the high road. You should always have empathy and consider where they're coming from and consider where the person's coming from. It turns out he's a wonderful guy. We become incredible friends. Same thing, Randy.
Well, it was. I did a podcast with him back in the day, and it's the worst podcast we've ever done. And the ironic thing is how I dismissed and treated him is one of the reasons why I hate it so much.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, for him to be so sweet to me,
yeah,
like really open my eyes, like you're a dick.
Yeah, no, that's how I felt. That's how I felt too. I'm like, oh, jeez, why do I do that? So
and he is a great guy.
Yeah, and so you never win by taking the low road slugfest. So why do it? So you just have to remember always high road, high road, high road. So yeah, right. Respect. So yeah,
it's to me. I'd like to spend more time on this one, maybe another time. But respect, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, but it seems like it's such a problematic word because it can mean so many different things depending on the context when it's used, like a lot of words. But a lot of times people expect that respect means that you agree with me, or expect means that you understand me, or it means that you accept me, or accept my position, or whatever.
No, it does not. What respect? I'm not saying
it does. I'm saying that there's people who, in certain contexts, take it that way. Don't disrespect me.
But Randy doesn't respect those people.
Right.
What I'm saying is that ideas are open forum. Ideas need to be subject to the arena of thought. And so just because I totally disrespect your position, your metaphysics, because you're a TBM, doesn't mean I look at you as a human being as being lesser. So respect the individual, but the ideas are open season. It's open game. And really one of the biggest problems of true believing Mormons is they have a difficult time separating their ideas from their identity. And so when you attack their idea...
Because their identity, though, is the church, and the church's truth claims are part of the identity, So
if you attack the idea of whether or not the church is true, you're attacking them personally.
Right.
And then that completely short-circuits any kind of discourse. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's a good example of one of the contexts where respect means something different than what John talked about, because if you're talking to a Mormon leader and you say, I respect you and I sustain you, then you can't question or challenge,
anything that they say.
Right. So respect takes on this different meaning.
But that's why if you watch the interview or whatever, the Mormon Stories thing I did with John DeLynn, I had that whole, first introduction, 10 minutes of it was if you don't have any problems, there's no problem. I have all these slides of, it's completely possible for somebody who is not troubled by where they are in the Mormon church. That's fine. This isn't for you. I'm not talking to you. So you shouldn't feel threatened by me because I'm not attacking you. This is for people who are not feeling where you're at. So.
Okay. So the next word, that I have here, John, is jealousy.
Okay. And you're getting all these from the podcast that I'm watching?
Yeah, really? Jealousy? Where did that? I watched it too. I don't remember.
Just how I've gotten to know you a bit over the past few months. It seems to me that you are not a jealous person at all, that you have some views on this that are pretty valuable, that have really helped you be grounded in your life. So that's where that's
I guess I see jealousy as being an emotion that is born out of personal insecurity. And so people are jealous, let's say they're married or they have a boyfriend, and they are very concerned that person doesn't feel for them the way they feel for themselves, or whatever it is. So they're having a bunch of insecurities, and so jealousy is your own personal insecurity that is then playing out on the other person. And so for me, the way to, instead of being worried ever about jealousy, is one, you be personally self-secure so that you're not worried about that, secure in yourself. But then 2, your trust in the relationship you have and also the value of it, that I don't know, that the jealousy doesn't really enter in. It's not important. You already know that what you have is so much more valuable than any potential alternatives. So.
Do you ever counsel people in, the different leadership positions that you're in that don't have this innate sense of self-confidence, that's your number one point there, that do feel quite insecure? Like, how would you help somebody overcome a sense of insecurity and get that self-confidence so that jealousy doesn't play upon them and gnaw at them so much?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. So I talk to people, and so how do you develop a sense of self-security? I think that it's a process of building security and self-security. And so there's a old Rankin Bass Santa Claus special where you put one foot in front of the other.
In front of the other.
And soon you will be walking out the door.
Put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking across the floor. Put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out.
And so what do you do? You do things where you don't set yourself. If you are constantly setting yourself up for goals that are impossible, that you will fail at, then you are setting yourself up for failure. So instead of doing that, you set things that are very doable and succeed at that. And continue to build on those kind of things that allow you to feel good about yourself and secure in yourself. And unless you are secure in yourself, you really aren't able to develop an actual relationship that is going to be healthy, because the relationship will automatically have to feed the economics of you being insecure are that you're just having this massive import imbalance. And so you can't create the healthy relationship in the first place unless you're actually grounded yourself. So you have to do that first, and then you're able to be in the situation where you can have a grounded relationship.
If your entire self-worth is based on the success of a relationship, you're doomed.
Yeah, you're putting all the pressure on this relationship, and so suddenly all the weight is on this bridge, and it collapses. Of course it's going to.
So I'm actually curious, because you're a preacher, an ordained minister, right?
Well, ordained in the same way that I think some of you are. In that I'm an elder in the Melchizedek priesthood. Yes, so
it's different in that people actually would come to you for couples therapy, right?
Well, not so much, but yes. So I have younger gay guys who have come and asked me questions about that kind of thing,
but not heterosexual couples.
I have only been a pastor since January, so I'm not going to set myself up here as a bigger expert than I am. Okay, so yes, I've talked to younger gay guys in their 20s who are like, why can't I find anybody? Why can't I be happy? Why where's the guy for me? That kind of thing. But that happens all the time.
Mm.
Because those poor guys, it's our population is so much smaller, and it is actually really quite hard to find somebody comparatively. So.
But so your advice is to set small, accomplishable goals and accomplish them, and that's what builds up that sense of self-confidence. So
yes.
And in my mind, I've got Bill Murray, baby step to the elevator, baby step on the elevator,
baby step onto the elevator, baby steps into the elevator. I'm in the elevator.
I think that works.
Yeah, right.
So,
okay, that's good.
Because
that's
people
good
set themselves up for failure all the time.
Yeah.
And so they set their relationship up for failure. So this thing, when people are like, boy, things aren't working out. If maybe we'll have a baby and that'll make it all good for our marriage. Well, what are you putting on this baby? So that's like a crazy place to put pressure. So the pressure has to be in the foundation itself, So where is your grounding yourself in order to build a bridge to another person, much less make it all be on the baby or something like that,
Didn't ask to come into the world.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much that we could explore on this that would be really interesting, especially in the context of the Mormon Church, where any real focus on yourself is selfish.
Jimmy, remember your promise.
Right? You're supposed to be doing things for other people and service and self-sacrifice and all of these things that sound like they're really good, great, noble values, but then you kind of rob yourself maybe of that sense of self security and self-confidence, except for the real sociopaths like me and Heather and others. I don't know, the narcissists out there. So, all right. The next word is faith.
Okay, so faith I define differently than is commonly defined in Mormonism.
I expected as much.
So, I guess what I would say about the idea of faith is that ultimately, at your core, when you do introspection, when you think, why do you do anything? So everybody has philosophical ideas or stories or narrative about why they are the way they are, but they don't always have a lot of introspection where they get down to the core and decide where is that really coming from? Why do they like this or that? Like me, I love books. Why do I like books? It's hard to even say why I like books. I don't know. I love books though, and I love to make books, and so I wanted to maximize my ability to do that in life, and I've been able to do that. That's been a goal that I have, and a thing that I like, and a thing that I've been able to accomplish. But in some places, therefore, that like of books is a belief. It doesn't necessarily have, at a certain point, it doesn't have some kind of rational thing that I can justify using quantum physics or something like that. It's rather based on where I am at in life, whatever my genetics, whatever my background. It's something that I've seen inside of me that I value. And so it's a belief or a thing, a value set. At some point or other, you have to, at some point in those value sets, say, I value this, I don't value that. This is meaningful to me, this is not meaningful to me. Those are somewhere down in your deep sets. And so that is how I define faith, which is to say that everyone has those things, whether or not they have done the introspection, whether or not they're aware of them. They may not know why they're doing the surface things that they do, but they're based on underlying beliefs that they have.
So you are truly a skeptical believer, and I'm so grateful that I have you in my life to kind of ground me a little bit. But I have a little bit of a challenge to your belief system. Your God, like when you say or when you describe the Mormon God, the God of the lost keys. Yeah. He's going to find your keys, but he's not going to save the girl down the street from getting repeatedly raped by her dad.
Right.
Which creates a capricious God that's not worthy of worship.
Right.
And your God is and I've said this to a couple of people, like if I was ever to convert to believing again, it would be to your God. But the issue I have with your God is he doesn't seem very accessible to the masses. And
my God why doesn't find your keys.
He does not. He does not find your keys at all.
Did not find your keys. Yeah.
No.
But it's not even
what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this God, he, she, it, whatever. Why does he hide himself so carefully from the masses? Because there's not relatively speaking.
I don't know that it's not he anyway. I don't know that God,
whatever.
The divine is hidden from anybody because it depends on how. Again, we're defining the divine, and so in as much as the divine could be defined as everything, and it is all encompassing, everything that's all around us, all of our thought, everything that is spiritual, the entire realm of ideas, all of the universe, all of knowledge, human knowledge, everything that we have accumulated, all of that can be encompassed within the divine. And in as much as that's the case, that's not hidden.
But why do you think that your God has designed the universe in such a way where the average person can't even come close to understanding it?
So
Well, can I back up and say, John, do you believe that there's a God that designed the universe?
So I think that the problem with just even the concept of intelligent design is, generally speaking, that's an anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're imagining God as a guy who's designing something, as opposed to that we have all of this thing that we are experiencing, all of this universe, and so which exists and has all of these things that we can learn about. And in learning about all of that's our exploration. Why don't we know about it? We haven't known anything throughout all of time. We have been people who have been massively more limited in all of our knowledge. The people at the beginning of civilization, so at the very beginning of literacy, there are geniuses. The person who wrote the Epic of Gilgamesh already has a concept of mortality that is 1,000 times more sophisticated than what later Christians are worrying about thousands of years later than that. And it's sobering and amazing that anybody was so amazingly intelligent and thoughtful all the way back to the very beginnings of when there's even writing. And yet, so we've only been getting more and more and more knowledge than we've ever had before. So I shouldn't imagine that we would already understand absolutely everything about the universe. It's not possible, probably, because we ourselves are finite beings within the universe, and the amount of things that there are to know is probably infinite. So therefore, there's a divide there that was just eternal.
Yeah,
So.
But like you're so if your God exists,
Can I call time out? And Randy, just can I ask you to not say your God? And because I think the way that John says it is the divine, and
Okay.
trying to stay away from God at all, and to say the divine.
Okay, so John,
Yeah.
the divine that you ascribe to is either unwilling, incapable, or has some other design on, not making himself more understandable, accessible. And people, throughout the millennia have been fighting each other over what, their ideas of God is the true one. And if anyone else contradicts it, then they must die.
Yeah.
So is it part of the divine that you ascribe to? Is that part of his design, or is he incapable, or how do you see that? Do you understand the question?
So yeah, of course. So people have acted not only in the name of God, but also in all kinds of gods, right? Name throughout all of human history, based on their understanding and their conception of where they are at and how they've been able to perceive the divine and perceive the universe.
Or even an ideology like Nazism.
And ideology, certainly. So, and which I don't even think is actually particularly different. So I think that when you have an atheist ideology, whatever, like Stalinism or Nazism, it doesn't matter. It's not that that's atheists are bad or something. It's rather this is something that people do. And in fact, it's not. Even though it's overtly atheist in some ways, there's a lot of religions that are overtly atheist, like Buddhism may not believe in God as it's defined by Westerners, right? But I think that ultimately everybody actually, whether or not people reject the word God or the divine or however you want to define it, I think that ultimately people do have a belief, whether or not they're aware of what it is, because they may well believe that there are underlying physical laws of the universe, or whatever the thing is that they have. Maybe they're actually nihilists. Then they at least believe in nothing. So, in other words, that there may be something, and then you're defining God as nothing. But that is that is, it's been open throughout all of human history, and it is only a modern phenomenon when we have decided to have this very, very explicit picture of God that we don't personally believe in, and then we reject it, which I call rejectionism. And so that's a new thing, and it has existed in the modern times, and it hasn't existed previously in human history. And so what it does, and what modernism has done, is cut us off from our roots and cut us off from empathy and understanding everybody that went before us, which they were not believing in a modern conception of God. They were believing in something else, and we are not listening to them because we are considering them as having believed in our modern conception that we have created and then rejected.
So I want to go back to Randy's question and explore some of the assumptions that I'm hearing in it, and just to see if this stacks up, John, with the way that you conceive of the divine. Because I've heard you say in the past that the divine is undefinable, right? It's unfathomable. We just can't really understand it. And what I think I hear you saying, Randy, is that there is some divine that actually has an awareness of itself, an awareness of us, a will and a desire and a purpose, and all of these things that are kind of anthropomorphizing onto this divine. And I'm not. I don't know, John, if that even fits with.
Right. So I haven't said any of those things. Right. And so one of the ways theologians throughout time have defined the divine or God is what is called apophatic theology, which is you're a person who is less willing to make those kind of positive claims that Randy is maybe positing and rejecting, and saying instead that we can't define positive attributes of the divine. What we can instead say are the divine is not this, the divine is not that. So I'm perfectly happy with all kinds of apophatic theology, which is to say the divine is not a guy. The divine is not like a human who does all these petty things or is thinking in those kind of ways. That's not what the divine is. But I'm not saying, therefore, in saying that, we're saying what divine is not saying the divine is limited in this kind of way. And that is something that people have done for millennia. So that is part of the conversation that continues to exist. It's not something I'm just made up.
Yeah, but the divine is still, your divine is still not very accessible to the common man, and right. I find that troubling.
I would disagree with that, though. I mean, I still don't completely understand, John, what your divine is. But I think about so many rituals that different people have in the world that connect them to something that they feel is outside of themselves. Maybe it's not outside of themselves, but it raises them to a different state that they would consider divine, or it stimulates their thoughts.
All sorts of these spiritual practices that are like what I'm talking about when I talk about introspection, when you're trying to get at what your root beliefs are, when you're trying to connect down to what you truly believe, when you're connecting, therefore, that's spiritual practice. And that's what I would define as spiritual practice. And so to Randy's point, does my God, if he doesn't find your keys...
I didn't say that. I didn't say your God. That's edited out.
Okay, well, before we said, does my God find your keys? No, my God doesn't find your keys. Well, what's the point? If my God won't find your keys for you, what's the point, right? So it is harder to explain what the point is. It is much easier to have the black and white God of the fundamentalists. The main problem that fundamentalists have with their black and white God is that God doesn't exist.
Yeah, but the divine created our brains to be kind of black and white, to be in-group, out-group. And the result of all this is tribalism. My God versus, the other tribe's God. And it just seems really, really inefficient.
But when you, you're the divine created, I get stuck on that, Randy, because if you forget about any idea of God and you just look at natural selection and evolution and you say that's the way that our God would create it, what would you call that? Nature? Like nature created, but there wasn't some will that you're ascribing to that or some design that you're describing to that. It just came about and evolved. And so couldn't that be the divine? And it's not something that has a will or a design to it. It's just higher ideas, like, these eternal spiritual ideas, and that even having this conversation right now where we're exploring ideas is a way of connecting to the divine.
Well, if I can't ascribe to the divine as having a purpose or some kind of, consciousness, then it's superfluous. And just go with the natural fucking world, because that's how things work, and everything makes sense when you go with the natural world.
Well, then the natural world is the divine to you. In other words, you're defining it that way. What is the purpose of
I don't need to ascribe divine to it. I just say it's the natural world. I don't have to add.
But the point of it is, that's what you're saying. In other words, in the whole course of all of civilization, that's how people have therefore defined that. You're just rejecting the term.
Yeah, but you always talk about, is a God worthy of worship? And if he's just this knucklehead that started this system that causes so much gratuitous suffering, and maybe we should talk about the problem of evil,
but we've already rejected that. We've already said that's not God, that's not divine. Okay, so we don't need to keep going back to that, But if
what I'm saying is if is your God? I just said it. Sorry.
It's all right. I get it.
Is your God worthy of worship either? If he's just kind of playing with, natural laws.
But
I don't know why you need. I don't know
he's
why.
He's not a guy who's playing with natural laws. Rather, what we're talking about is, instead of thinking of a guy, which you keep on coming back to, who's doing stuff,
I don't know how else to think about it.
Well, think of it as being wisdom, all of intelligence, the idea of intelligence itself. You should think that before you even think of a guy.
And
in other words, that's much more close to what I'm even talking about.
Think of the pursuit of knowledge, Randy, how important that is to you, and the using the scientific approach as a way of learning new things and testing and proving new things. You've got this drive to learn and explore the mysteries of the universe. There's nothing God about that, but I think that's akin to what John's saying is the divine.
But what I just keep getting hung up on is how disappointed I am in the divine's creations. How few of them have this intellectual curiosity to really find the divine and to find and to search out true knowledge, not just dogma, but knowledge. It's depressing. Do you understand where I'm coming from, John?
Yeah, but you have some different expectations for people than I do. So I guess I'm not disappointed constantly by people the way you are, because I guess I don't assume that people are all going to be like me. They're not like me in all kinds of different ways. We're like them.
Yeah, but I live in America. I don't live in Canada. And the vast majority of the people I come in contact with believe in angels are real and believe that evolution is just an idea. And it's so despairing to see even the legislation that they're trying to push in the southern states about science education. It's like, oh my God, we're going backwards.
Right. And so the way that we can help all those people is by providing them with alternative religion that isn't based on this kind of nonsense, which is leading them down this really bad, stupid path that is actually having legal and legislative consequences. So instead, if we don't abandon them, just because everybody's able to go to graduate school, they're able to spend all this time thinking of this stuff. They have other things they have to do that is very important with their family and every other thing. So, but if everybody has abandoned them and the only thing they can do is go to a mega church where the person tells them, oh, it's all simple. Just read here in Leviticus, blah, blah, blah,
Give money.
Yeah, exactly. And then just vote for us and we'll get rid of all of the dumb scientists who want to teach evolution to your kids or whatever it is by making it illegal. Well, what can you blame them? They don't have any alternative. They just wanted to go somewhere to raise their kids in a good church or something like that. They just had that idea, but there were no alternatives. So that's why That's
But
why
my
we need
answer
to
to that-
instead provide something where we can, explain, no, this is how we can be connected to all of our heritage without viewing it in this very bad, negative way where we're throwing away all of our future.
Yeah, and so my answer to that is if there is a divine, why can't he do a better job? Is he incompetent?
Randy, stop.
You're a fundamentalist. You want the divine to do all these dumb things that the fundamentalist God does.
I'm just saying, man. I know it doesn't work that way because there's no divine, but I just
No,
fundamentalist God.
if you're gonna add on an additional assumption, and we're talking about Occam's law here, I just think that additional assumption should add more than it does, and that's all I'm saying. And your divine is something I could totally embrace, because when we talk, like, we agree on about 99.5% of everything we talk about.
Right.
And you're a believer. You're on one side of the fence, and I'm an atheist on the other side of the fence. And I find that really fascinating.
But you guys both believe in the same thing, Randy. You're just calling it something different, and you're not hearing... Like you keep going back to divine and calling it he. And John's like, no, that's not what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a crutch. It's hard to, like, throw away.
Yeah.
I mean, I for 30 years of my life, I believe that he was a dude in the Kolob solar system. So,
right.
It's hard
I just have a different perspective of this by going back to looking at what people are writing throughout all of history. So I just spend all of my time in ancient and medieval texts, and I look at what people in the past have thought about this, and I don't have a view that is based on just what people have thought for the last 150 years. Yeah. And so that's why when you even say cynicism, I'm like, well, don't be so mean to the cynics. They were really, they were great philosophers,
The cynics of the 12th century were awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus was a cynic.
Right.
All right, I've got one final word, and then we're done. And this will be easy for you, John, because you love it.
Okay.
Community.
Yeah. So I do love community. So, I mean, if we go back to Aristotle said that we're a political animal, which means we are people that are in community. We evolved in community. We are naturally, when I told you I had written my own self-religious autobiography in my 20s, it was called Friendship, right? So in other words, it was about community between peers. And
I thought you were going to say gay men.
No, well, it wasn't entirely about that, although there was like a lot of the ideas of eternal marriage between gay men involved in the religion.
It was a bad joke.
Yeah. And so then I also think that we have deconstructed the fabric of society in the form of all the local associations and communities and everything that are involved in building it up. And I think that an example, and I've used, is that when George W. Bush invaded Iraq and he thought, well, we could just create a democracy there by wiping out the dictator and giving everybody on the ground floor an election, and you'd elect it, and that's what democracy is, because we've completely forgotten what democracy really is and what had evolved over the entire course of the Middle Ages, which is every bit of institution at every local level, all of the local connections, the juries, the associations, the local businesses, local congregations, local networks, all of those things that are actually the basis of society, not just one election for president. And everything wonders why. Well, why didn't everything change when we elected Hope president instantly? Because they don't understand what the whole thing is about. I mean, it involves all of this network throughout the entire fabric of society that we have, over the course of our lifetimes, systematically dismantled. And then people wonder why they feel disenfranchised. They walk into a Walmart. They have no connection to this mega corporation. It's just between them and the mega corporation. It's between the federal government that is this omnipowerful thing that has never existed before in time, and an individual that has nothing.
It's not their neighbor Fred the merchant.
Which is what we would have had in the past.
Right.
And so reconstructing those institutions is what my life calling has been. And so, for example, when Mike and I got into the Mormon history community, we volunteered to be directors of the John Whitmer Historical Association to help write it, to bring it back, to encourage new members, to increase what it was doing, increase publishing, which I love books, as I mentioned, right? And so, in other words, to do things that I think are valuable, but then also to revitalize, dwindling old institutions. So I love Sunstone. I support Sunstone. So, I moved to a city so that I could live in downtown, and there's all these little shops everywhere, little restaurants, our local pub. We go to all these kind of, local things so that we are interacting, in a, living network. That's my goal on everything, and the same thing is true in my congregation. That's why I think the congregational life is important. So for all of people who are Mormon, who have been part of this mega church, which is functionally entirely centralized in the power structure of 15 guys that are sitting around, and then everybody else is so totally disenfranchised out in their wards. If instead the effort and the money or anything, just like a tenth of the effort and the money that you'd ever put into those things, you put into your own little congregation that you had control over. My congregation is its own independent legal nonprofit. We control all of our own money. We do everything that we want to do. We're just, so in other words, if you were in that situation, you would have built up your own local society that you have a stake in, that you can't just have somebody excommunicate you from, and will, because you're nobody. Who cares? You have no stake in it. And there's nobody who's Mormon no matter how much people who are Mormon think that their identity is Mormon, they have no stake at all. They could be wiped out in a second from it because they don't own it. There's no ownership, So.
Yeah.
So I want to take this concept of community and put you on the spot a little bit, because now, you've joined this small community of guys that are this goofy podcast called Infants on Thrones.
Yes.
And we've got this cyber community, or whatever you call it, with listeners. So what, and I guess as a member of Infants on Thrones, what does that mean? It means that you're able to create episodes, minisodes. You're one of 8 that is creating and shaping this thing. So how does your view of community, how will that impact what you want to do as part of this podcast?
That's why I wanted to be part of it, because I value community. And so this is a new kind of community. I'm not only a traditionalist where I just pine for things that are the past and that are obsolete or something like that. I also like to participate in all the brand new forms of community, like podcasting or blogging. And so I've been part of the By Common Consent blogging community, or when Mormon Matters was a blog community, and participated in dozens and dozens of blogs. And I like the community that you guys have created, both immediately, locally, so which is to say in the group that you have just as the personalities, and so the community that you have as a circle of friends, but then also more broadly, building a broader community where you're interacting with a whole bunch of loyal listeners who are like-minded and who really get value out of it. And so I value that, and I value being a part of it. So
cool, good answer.
All right.
There was this one moment when it was very early. Excuse me. It was very early. In my faith crisis, and I was still struggling with the idea of gay marriage. And you were on, I don't know if it was Mormon Expression or Mormon Stories, but you were like, that was the first time I understood that you were gay, because you just said, how does my gay marriage affect any straight person's marriage?
Right.
And that was a moment in my life that I'll never forget. I was driving to my Peoria office, and it was just like, holy shit.
Right.
And I mean, there was a time when I was like, oh, he's a believer. So I kind of put you in the other group.
Yeah.
But over time, the more I listened to you, the more I was like, well, this guy knows his shit. and for you to join.
And again, I want to say though that I'm not ever saying that I got the right path and everybody has to be where I'm at. Where you're at is a completely valid, for me, way that anybody can live life. In other words, you've done your own introspection. You're on your own journey. You are looking at where you're at in your faith crisis, from faith crisis to faith reconstruction to philosophical reconstruction of your values in life that is very positive and wonderful. So, I'm not saying, oh, you should be in my church, otherwise, you're going to hell.
But you once asked me a question. You're like, usually people will have just enough information to deconstruct their faith, and then they'll just move on and leave. Why did you not do that? Do you remember asking me that question?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be mean to usually people, but that's true.
So, Glenn, why do I not leave?
I don't know. I mean, I think you really like it. You really like talking about it, and
I don't know why. Why do I like talking about it? That's the question. I'm sincerely asking. Why do we like talking about it? Not just me, but why do we like talking about it?
Because I think that God gave you a brain. He designed it especially for you.
Uh-huh.
Because he has.
It's not called God. It's the divine.
Because God.
It's Randy's God.
Because your God has a mission for you, Randy, to reach out and touch a lot of people, and so He put this drive in you that you might not understand. You just have to accept on faith. And I don't know, Randy. I really don't know. No idea. I don't completely understand the drive in me.
Do you not ask that question about yourself? Because you're the most passionate one of all of us. And why can't you just let it go?
Well, I think I have let it go, but I mean, I enjoy the creative process behind this medium of podcasting. And there's a lot of things that I'm still really interested in. Like I'm still really interested in the way that faith or spirituality or religion or whatever you call it operates in people's lives. And I don't know. There's a lot out there that I want to understand that I don't yet. So that's kind of a drive. But as far as like Mormonism, truth claims being BS, like I mean, to me that's like because this is where you and I get friction every once in a while. Like I'm just not as interested in that, even though I have fun with it. Like I'll have fun with that Hobbit Gospel Truths blog, I mean, stuff like that's fun, but it's just because
from if someone who has a degree in literature.
Yeah, but she's like 20, 22. I mean, she's young, I mean, like I took a swipe at her, and I kind of feel a little bad about that, but not enough to not do it. It was too much fun. But it was the creative process of putting that together, and also going, yeah, I remember. But there's also, like, what was it that made me want to go to graduate school to study folklore, to be a professor? Like John said, I enjoyed teaching. I really liked it, and I really missed it. And so, to me, this is kind of scratching that itch a little bit.
That's true in my life, like because. Just about every position I ever held in the church was a teaching position, and I really enjoyed being kind of like the purveyor of knowledge, and the way people looked at me, and
an instigator, like getting people to think, because you've got as much contrarian in you as I do in me, to say, well, let's mix this up a little bit and talk about it and see where it lands.
Okay,
but you guys are also only. I mean, it's still only a few years, right?
I don't know how.
Summer of 2012 is when we started, so...
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I mean to say in terms of post-faith crisis, that's what I mean.
Oh, that happened in the spring of 2009 for me.
Oh, so that's a long time. So yeah, you held on. So I mean, not because well, no, I mean seriously, because people leave. So and so that's one of the things that I when you ask, well, why do I want to be in this community? It's rare to find a community that has landed into stability. Because normally ex-Mormonism is a trajectory, and so it's very hard to find people that aren't just in a stage of it. But you guys are in a place where it seems very stable, you know?
Yeah, we've had a couple of comments that say that Mormon stories is kind of like the gateway drug, Mormon expressions the anger phase, and then infants is kind of the landing place, and that's what we want to be. Is like, okay, prima facie, we all agree it's bullshit. So what do we do now? And that's kind of the platform of our podcast.
We've got to wrap up because I've got to go to bed. But just quick, John, you don't believe in anything like a soul or a spirit or an afterlife, right? That's not part of your belief system, or are you kind of open to? You don't know.
So spirit in a Mormon sense is that it's a physical thing, because Joseph Smith thought
the
that
hand
spirit
and
is
the glove
physical.
kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Spirit in the traditional sense is idea.
Yeah, thought.
So is there thought and idea and consciousness? What's the self? So we don't know what the self, and in some ways it's defining the self as a complex philosophical idea. So there's where that is as far as I'm concerned. In terms of afterlife, all afterlife ideas are simply speculative, in my opinion. But what you can talk about, I'm becoming more open to the idea of people in memory. In other words, in thought as being, again, the realm of ideas as having that kind of meaning. I don't personally look forward to a existence that's like physical existence after life in any way, or any kind of consciousness or anything like that. I'm not scared about the end of life and death. I think that life is a ongoing process, and that death is nothing at all to be afraid of.
Your vision of the divine isn't that when you die and decompose, but there's parts of you, electrons, whatever, on the atomic level that live on, that there might be some consciousness retained in that would.
There's no
merge.
consciousness that I would be thinking of, and I don't.
Not the kind of consciousness that the traditional Christian would have for heaven, where you are John Hamer for eternity.
Right.
No,
I think that's a very
what about
simple idea, and I don't think it actually makes any sense.
What about memories that embed in DNA that on the instinct level? So like
memories don't embed on DNA. That is completely incoherent.
Probably it is, and I have no freaking idea what I'm talking about. But how scientifically do you explain the instincts that animals have to be able to do certain things? Just repeat it over time. Like how it's survival of the fittest, right? And you've got these. I don't know. There's like I was watching a BBC World or something documentary once, and watching these polar bears, like the mother and her two cubs, come out of the ground, and they're talking about how it's that time of the year where they've got to get to this place and get over the glacier before it breaks, because that's where the food is, and they know this. And I'm thinking, how do they know when to come out and where to go? And like the glacier's going to freeze and they got to get over, or it's going to break off, they got to get over before it. Like there's certain things in the animal kingdom that they do instinctively that it seems to me it's got to be embedded in their genetic code somewhere that you do this. And so is there something like that?
I don't know, because that would be in the spirit. That would be somewhere in their genetic code or their mentality or their instinct or wherever it's being recorded, or their early culture or whatever, however they're doing it.
They're alive today because they do that.
Yeah, right.
But it has nothing to do with something about like
it's
a
physical.
ghost,
it's
a
material.
physical ghost like the Ghostbusters.
Right.
So the idea of Ghostbusters is not a real thing. So that part
really?
That's not the case. But people believe it, right? That ghosts are a real thing. So that's a 19th century invention. That's not, this kind of idea.
So wait, are you saying people in the 13th century never got haunted by ghosts?
They didn't think of ghosts as being a physical thing anyway.
Okay.
So, in other words, spiritualism, all of our ideas of ghosts and seances and all this kind of thing is it's all coming out of. They have some kind of idea of ghosts. I'd have to look at exactly what they're thinking in the Middle Ages, but it's really nothing like what we have now, where all of this stuff comes out of the 19th century, just mania for spiritualism. Everybody in the late 19th century was a spiritualist. That's why we have Ouija boards and seances and all of this kind of stuff, because we're obsessed with it. You know?
And Harry Houdini debunking them.
What was the explanation then, or the understanding behind Jesus saying to Martha and Mary, "Don't touch me because I haven't yet ascended to the Father"? Like, the Mormon explanation for that was always he hadn't been resurrected yet, and he couldn't be, impurified, or something like that, or maybe he was just a spirit, and he said, "Don't."
And did you ever wonder what would have happened if they did touch him? Yeah. Would have ruined the whole plan.
Woo! No, it's lucky they didn't. Got it. Well, so already the idea of resurrection is a very weird idea in terms of for Westerners to get. So since we're mostly descended from Greco-Roman thought, Paul hardly could even get resurrection to understood, because Greeks and Romans understood there to be kind of like this life force inside of you that is entirely, like a spirit idea, which is not physical, but is the opposite of physical. But whereas the Pharisees and other Middle Eastern people had this idea that you actually would be bodily resurrected, which is more or less like a zombie. And they really had that, and they were upset, and they were worried about if you would ever dismember the body, because they really thought your whole body would kind of reanimate. And so if you were dismembered or cremated or something like that, that was a real problem.
Yeah, we talked about that in our funerals. Discussion,
so so our idea that we have is, with this modern, 20th century celestial, whatever, Star Trek resurrection, where you use the transporter device to resurrect somebody, is completely different from the zombie idea that they had when Jesus was alive. And the zombie apocalypse idea is just a crazy, weird idea. Anyway, so
that is quite the image.
Well, that's why, throughout all the early Middle Ages, then, saints, when they would dig them up, and they're like, "Oh, he hasn't even hardly decomposed. That means he's a real saint."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is Peter truly buried in the Vatican?
We don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I remember
dig him up.
When I read.
Can't tell.
When I read, what's it called?
Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci Code.
For real? That's what you were thinking?
Yeah, when I read the Da Vinci Code, or actually it was, I think it was Angels and Demons.
Angels and Demons, yeah.
Yeah. I was a believer.
Yeah.
And I remember being taught as a Mormon that Peter had been resurrected. How else could he give Joseph Smith the Melchizedek priesthood? And I was like, this author just doesn't get it. Peter's not down there. He's resurrected. He's gone.
Yeah, we don't really know. So, he falls out of the real historical record, and so it's as likely as not that he died in Rome and isn't actually in the Vatican.
It's probably 99.9999% chance that that's not Peter's body.
But do we know that there was a historical Peter?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. I don't really want to get into that.
Yep.
All right.
Historical Peter, historical Paul.
Oh, crap.
Historical David.
I never hit record, you guys.
Oh.
I'm kidding. I hit record. Sorry.
This is way too long a podcast, though, so we have to...
It is.
Edit it, right?
No, it's just shit I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking across the floor. Put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door. If I want to change...
Hi, this is Todd from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I love driving to work because I listen to Infants on Thrones on my commute. You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com, and if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Put one foot in front of the other, the floor. Put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.